But first, our customary story. And since we are talking about Vov Tishrei, the Yodzeit of the Rebbetzin Chana, we will tell several stories of the Rebbetzin Chana. Our family would visit the Rebbetzin Chana periodically. We came in 1954, and with our mother, Aleh Shalom, we would visit the Rebbetzin Chana pretty often. And she was always very open and very friendly. And I heard her say a few times, Ich bin nicht nur a Bas Talmid Chochem, ich bin nicht an Eishes Chover. She's not only a Bas Talmid Chochem, the daughter of the Meir Shleimah, the love of Nikolaev, but she's also an Eishes Chover. Eishes Chover, the wife of Hagoyin HaChosid Kubal, Rebbe Levi Yitzchak. She told the story that Rebbe Levi Yitzchak, when he was in jail, there was no water to drink. And once, after great efforts, he was brought a cup of water. And it would seem that he would use it to drink, because there was a question of to sustain himself. Nevertheless, he said, Baruch Hashem, there's a little water, and we can wash in the hand, that you can wash your hand. So he washed his hands with a little bit of water that he got. The Rebbetzin Chana would say that the last Simchas Torah, that the Rebbe Yitzchak was together with the Rebbe. So she would say that Seider Mann und Seider Sohn haben gewusst, dass das ist der letzte Simchas Torah zusammen. He says, my husband and my son both knew that this was the last Simchas Torah together. But the father didn't want to tell it to his son. The son didn't tell it to his father. And what they did, a whole Simchas Torah, sie haben getanzt und getanzt und getanzt. They danced, and they danced, and they danced. The Rebbetzin Chana would generally not remain home alone. There was always somebody with her, and it was known that this is Milmailo. This is how the Rebbe wanted, that his mother should not be ever left alone. My sister, my older sister Leah, the wife of Rabbi Elkan, had something to do with it. And more than once she would call me and she would say I should go over to the Rebbetzins house. The door would be open, the Rebbetzin would be in her room, I would be in the dining room, and I would just be there for an hour, for two, so the Rebbetzin should not be alone. Once, I think I was 16 years old, the Rebbetzin told me she needs a favor. And she brought out a pair of boots, of black boots, of suede, and she said the boots need fixing, and she gave them to me, and she told me what was the problem, and that I should fix it and bring it to her. I asked for God's help. The Rebbetzin lived on President, corner Kingston, 1418. And on President Street, or on Albany between Union and President, there was an apartment building, and on Albany Avenue there were a few stores, and one of them was a shoe store, a Jewish shoe store, a Jewish man. I took it to him and I told him in my mind what he has to do, and he did. And he fixed the boots, the black suede boots. He put fur on the inside, suede on the outside. That's what I asked him to do, and he did a very good job. I brought it to the Rebbetzin. The Rebbetzin said, "Ein minute." She took it to her room. She put them on, and when she came back, she was all smiles. She said, "Zeyer git, zeyer bakveim." She spoke a Yiddish like they spoke in Ukraine, and Ukrainian Yiddish. She came from Nikolaev. Zeyer git, zeyer bakveim. and I thanked Almighty God for the great schus that He sent my way. The Rebbetzin Chana told my mother a story, and when I heard the story, when the Rebbetzin Chana told it in 1954, it seemed to me like this was a personal story. My mother was her first cousin, or the first cousin to the Levi Yitzchak, and she was telling my mother a personal story. And I didn't know whether that story could be repeated. And I didn't until about 2-3 years ago. The story went something like this, that between the time of her engagement and the time of the wedding, she wanted Rebbe Levi Yitzchak as a lontana schlappe. You should wear, that's what they call hats like this. And he insisted on wearing a casquette. And negotiations took a while. That was Nachani's telling the story. And then she put her eyes down and she says, "Und ich hab ausgeführt." And I had my way. He put on a hat, a schlappe. When I heard this story, as mentioned, I told this is a personal story. It's not to be repeated. And I never repeated the story. Until about 2-3 years ago, somebody published a story. And the story goes something like this. That the Rebbetzin Chana, before the wedding, wanted her husband to wear a casquette, to wear a hat, abschlappe. And the Levi Yitzchak at first didn't want. And he asked the Rebbe Nishma Seiden. And the Rebbe Nishma Seiden answered that whatever the Rebbetzin Chana wants, he should do. Somebody published this story. After that, I'm telling the story, and what happened. And what it seems is that the Rebbetzin Chana knew. She told us her part of the story. My sister, Leah soll sein gesund, would come in to see the Rebbetzin Chana often, and once the Rebbetzin Chana said to her, once or more than once, "Bei mir is heint a Yontif." It's a Yontif by me today. And the Yontif is, "Rabbi Kuman a brief von mein Sohn." The Rebbetzin Chana got a letter from her son in England, to the Yisrael Yalev. The way the letter would come, it was a letter written by her daughter-in-law, Genya. And she would write a letter. And on the margin, there were a few words written by the Rebbe. But the Rebbe would get the letter, the Rebbe would write a few words in the handwriting of his brother, the Yisrael Yalev. And then the Rebbe would send it back to England, and then they would send it from England to the Rebbetzin. And the Rebbetzin said, "Bei mir is heint a Yontif." Vov Tishrei was Shabbos Vov Tishrei. My sister Leah was called by Dr. Merritt, the doctor, to come to the house. She came to the house. The Rebbe Tzana was not well, and they needed to go to the hospital. The Rebbe, after the Verbringen, came to the house, and the Rebbe went with the Rebbetzin in the ambulance, and Leah also went with the Rebbetzin and the Rebbe in the hospital, to the hospital. Later, somebody asked Leah how come she went into the ambulance. She says it was natural. She was there with the Rebbetzin Chana, and she felt the Rebbetzin Chana needed her. In the hospital, it was already after. The Rebbe was there. But Leah saw that they were taking out some equipment from the room where Rebbetzin Chana was. So as she was pushing back the nurse, she should bring the equipment back into the Rebbetzins room. The nurse was taking out the equipment for obvious reasons. The Rebbe turned to Leibel Groner and he said, "Ezetuis as Leah weiß nicht. Min soll ihr nicht erzählen." It seems that Leah doesn't know, and you shouldn't tell her. Schuse Yogen Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael. We know the kibbud aim that the Rebbe gave his mother. As a child, I remember many times, the Rebbetzin Chana would come to shul, and after davening in his talis, the Rebbe would walk out of his room. He would stand in front of 770. He would watch his mother go through on Eastern Parkway and watch her until she turned the corner on Kingston Avenue, and he was no more able to see her, and then the Rebbe went back in his room. For children who saw this is the Rebbe himself, has all the time in the world, standing in front of 770, with a smile on his face, watching his mother. However slow she walked, the Rebbe watched and watched and watched until she turned the corner on Kingston Avenue, where the Rebbe was not able to see her anymore, and she went home. The volumes can be written on the Kibbud Av, and the Kibbud Aim, that the Rebbe gave his mother. And it's interesting to note, it says by Yankiv Avinu that the best 17 years he had were in Mitzrayim. One of the Meforshim says at the Balaturim, I believe. The best 17 years that the Rebbetzin Chana had were from Tovshin Zion, 1947, when she saw the Rebbe in Paris, when the Rebbe came to bring her from Paris to the United States, until her Istalkus.